about the protests of women in Iran fighting for their freedom and fighting for their equality under an Islamic regime that oppresses them and turns them into second-class citizens. But those same liberals demand that Christians stand up for the women's right to murder their own children in the West. So guys, I want to do a talk about the hypocrisies of our liberal society and how our liberal society has demonstrated its lack of consistency in its treatment of Christianity and Christians and the Holy Church with those of the Islamic community and other communities, as well as demonstrating the numerous and various hypocrisies and double standards of the Western world. And my first and main example to that is the recent decision of the European Court, which recently ruled in favour of a feminist who interrupted a Christian religious service naked from the top up and performed a theatrical abortion of our Lord Jesus Christ, mockingly dressed as Mary. I'm going to read from a Catholic news site dated October the 19th, 2022. The judges of the European Court of Human Rights, the ECHR, have ruled unanimously that a feminist who simulated aborting Jesus on the altar of the Parisian church of La Madeleine, bare-breasted, was exercising her freedom of expression. In an October 11th decision, the ECHR condemned France for having pronounced a suspended prison sentence against Eloise Bouton, a former member of a group Femmes, for acts of sexual exhibition. Bouton entered the famous Parisian church topless in December 2013, covered in pro-abortion slogans, and interrupted a rehearsal of Christmas carols. As local media reported, the feminist stood in front of the altar wearing a blue veil to mock the Virgin Mary, arms open in a cross with pieces of animal liver supposed to represent the fetus. She then mimed an abortion of Jesus before urinating on the ground in front of the faithful. Christmas is cancelled, Fenem wrote on its Facebook page following this desecration. From the Vatican to Paris, the international relay of Femmes against anti-abortion campaigns led by Catholic lobby continues. The Holy Mother Eloise has just aborted the embryo Jesus on the altar of the Madeleine. And this act of blasphemy, this act of desecration, was said by the European Court of Human Rights to be a legitimate act of freedom of speech. In other words, she didn't commit a crime, she didn't do anything wrong by pissing in a church, by standing naked in a church, by insulting the religious expressions of Catholics in France. What she did was a completely legal expression of her human right, according to the European Court of Human Rights. This vile, despicable court overturned the legitimate judgment not just of the local court in France, but of the Supreme Court of France that found Eloise guilty of blasphemy. But the same European Court of Human Rights found against an Austrian who had stated publicly that Mohammed was a paedophile and his behaviour was paedophilic. And when that Austrian was prosecuted for blasphemy, for injuring the religious sentiments of the Muslims of Austria, the European Court of Human Rights found in favour of the Austrian court and said that it was an illegitimate use of freedom of speech to describe Mohammed as a paedophile. And so what we see, ladies and gentlemen, is that the European Court of Human Rights finds it acceptable to blaspheme against the Christian faith, to desecrate Christian churches, to mock the Christian religion, to insult Christians in their places of worship, but says that you cannot publish facts about Mohammed that replicate the very statements of Islamic sources themselves that demonstrate Mohammed married a 6-year-old child and had sex with her when she was 9. It is the very height of hypocrisy of this European institution, demonstrating that liberal society is anti-Christian and duplicitous in its application of its laws and standards. The European Court of Human Rights is not worthy of your respect. It is not worthy of your support. And if you are a Christian, you should campaign to destroy this institution. This European Court of Human Rights is not worthy of the title a court, because it has no sense of justice. It has no sense of equality under the law. It is nothing but a puppet mechanism of a group of liberal elites who sit in their beds terrified of a Muslim backlash and so suppress any legitimate criticism of Islam, whilst harbouring in their heart hatred against the Christian faith and hatred against the Christian church. And they demonstrate their duplicity and double standards by their actions and their judgments. Christians around Europe should call for the destruction and the abolition of the Court of Human Rights. Christians in the UK should call for the government of the UK to withdraw from the European Court of Human Rights. And this is not the only expression of the hypocrisy of our liberal elites. There are many other examples. Take, for example, the green activists who are blocking our roads, damaging works of art, and committing vandalism, liberté in our streets. And the state is doing nothing to stop them. And why? Because our liberal elites celebrate the cause of those green activists. But those same liberal elites have called for the banning of legitimate protests outside of abortion clinics. And why? Because protesting outside of abortion clinics goes against what the liberal elites want you to follow, but protesting in favour of the environmental fanaticism of some goes in favour of what they want to achieve. And so we see a double standard of our liberal elites. A further example of the same is the treatment of the cause of Ukraine and the cause of Armenia. Both countries have come under attack by aggressive enemy states. Ukraine by Russia, Armenia by Azerbaijan. But the European Union is willing to boycott buying gas from Russia because they want to defend the freedom of the Ukrainians. And I agree with them. It's right to stand up for the Ukrainian people. But the same European Union and the same liberal elites are silent about the aggressive military campaign of Islamist Azerbaijan against Armenia and are willing to buy the gas of Azerbaijan, thus funding a war against Christian Armenia. Think about how the West argued for the self-determination of Kosovo, Serbia, invaded independent Serbia, carved out lands that belonged to Serbia and handed them over to Islamist terrorists and Albanian nationalists. And yet the same EU, the same NATO, the same Western world is completely silent about the legitimate demands of the vast majority of the people who live in Artsakh, Azerbaijan, a province of Azerbaijan populated by Armenians who want to be independent of Azerbaijan and join Armenia. Consider how these same liberal hypocrites celebrated the riots, vandalism and murder of BLM activists across cities in the United States and lied about what was happening on the ground, saying that these riots were mainly peaceful. And yet we see in America those same liberal elites getting into fits of apoplectic rage because of a right-wing riot in Washington, D.C. So months of riots by BLM communists were whitewashed, whilst one right-wing riot run by Trumpian supporters was decried as an attempt to usurp the state. Consider how the liberal state turned a blind eye recently to Muslim mobs marching in Leicester, harassing the Hindu community, harassing Hindu temples under the guise of protecting the Muslim community in Leicester.
Lies.
But that same liberal state condemned the EDL for protesting in Rotherham, for defending working class children from Muslim grooming gangs. Consider how
that's when they turn the blind eye.
This liberal state,
when all those Christian
the liberal state,
were raping children,
has been silent about the protests
nor do you
of women in Iran
to talk about the
fighting for their freedom and fighting for their equality under an Islamic regime
Is that your idea
that oppresses them and turns them into second-class citizens.
It's only
But
Muslim
those same liberals demand that Christians stand up for the women's right to murder their own children in the West. Now, ladies and gentlemen, notice how the militant communist heckles me for standing up for justice.
And when I mention
This man who justified the attempted murder of a woman in this park, this Christophel who hates Christians and attacks Christians every week, and the Islamist scum who walked away, who also hates Christians. These people are the enemies of the good. These people are your enemies, Christians. And you must stand up to them. You must stand up to the liberal militants. You must stand up to the militant communists. You must stand up to the Islamist militant. Do not be afraid of them. Do not be browbeat by them. Do not cower from them. But girdle strength in your heart, strength in your mind, and strength in your loins to stand up to Islamist scum like that and communist scum like this. Do not take lectures from them. Do not let them dictate to you what is right and what is wrong.
Persecuting Christians
Stand up
like ISIS,
to this trash,
Christian ISIS,
to this trash who legitimize the persecution of Christians, who persecute women, who persecute your brothers and sisters in Christ around the world. The reason why, ladies and gentlemen, that this trash behave in the way that they do is because they feel that they can.
Remember when you talked about
Because they are emboldened by your weakness. It is your weakness that emboldens the enemies of Christ. It is your weakness that emboldens the enemies of our Lord. And the apostles teach us. The apostles teach us that that those who are cowards will burn in hell. So to be so is the communists. Look at how they are triggered because I stand up for my brothers and sisters persecuted by people like him.
For this hating
Because I stand up for my brothers and sisters
anything under the shoe
standing up
of anyone else present
persecuted
in
by
Speaker's
people like
Corner.
him.
Communist
They both
right
know that
neo-Nazi,
if they talk, no one will listen to them.
dictatorial,
And that is why
and
they come to heckle me.
apolitical,
So,
too critical,
let's do a debate.
diacritical. No, we won't, because you're talking to the camera.
ladies and
Don't
gentlemen,
turn to me and like Moses, I'll
brothers and sisters,
bang the gavel and the hammer.
if we don't stand up to Islamist trash like this,
Crusader scum!
if we don't stand
Crusader
up
killing
to
Christians!
Islamist dogs like this,
Crusaders in the centuries!
vile
The four
human
crusades!
beings
Killing Christians!
who want to make
no parade!
Christians
Stop wearing your mask
second-class
parade!
citizens,
That's how you got
these people will impose Sharia law over us and make us into second-class citizens.
You're already a second-class citizen when you were
He
born!
wants to turn you,
So,
brothers and
remember what you
sisters,
said about my mouth?
into second-class citizens, having less rights than him. That's what he stands
I'm
for.
an alien!
And the reason why he behaves like this
Alhamdulillah.
is because his religion teaches him
Be to the
he is
Father alone.
superior,
You're trying to hide the fact that you
and he
worship God the
believes
Father alone.
that he can persecute
Man, go home.
and
Got a
discriminate
channel called
against
Soko.
Christians. Trust me,
You try act sane when you're
if you
psycho,
do
not
not
even
stand
local.
up to this Islamist ideology, this kind of subhuman behavior, akin to a barking dog, is what we will experience
Hitler!
in every street
Bob the
in
Builder,
our world.
the same, not peace-loving
People like him
archbishops know the
are
game. They
homophobic
are safe.
and believe homosexuals
like you.
should be killed.
They're waste man.
People like him
What? Extreme
believe
Christian like Anders
that
Breivik.
at the end of the world
Anders Breivik.
he will be able
You are
to kill
extreme.
all
You don't worship
Jews.
the Creator the
People
way that
like
peace-loving
him
Christians love
believe
to see. What
that
Muslims,
you as a Christian
you ain't peace
should be
loving.
made
You ain't
a
nothing.
second-class
You're
citizen.
Just nothing. It's a
People
tough
like
thing
him
coming on Sunday trying to
believe
earn money and you
that
talking
women
to me like
should be
you're
made
funny.
second-class
I'll show
citizens.
You funny because you make it
People
money.
like him
Christian
believe
extremists like Bob.
that pagans
All you're trying to do
should
is
be
get
killed.
views and rob.
People like
hearts
him
and souls and
believe that those who choose to
why you got
leave
left
the
behind.
religion of Islam
Did you get
should
left
be
behind?
killed. People like him
with a voice that
believe
so loud.
that
Why are you
a
shouting,
Christian
bro? Are you too
cannot
proud?
have authority
seed.
over a Muslim in the state. People like him believe that a Christian man cannot marry a Christian woman. People like him believe that the cross should not be shown publicly. People like him believe that Christians should not be allowed to evangelize their faith. People like him believe that Christians should not be allowed to have public processions in the streets of Muslims. People like him believe that Christians should pay a discriminatory tax called the jizya that demonstrates their humiliation in an Islamic state. People like him believe that slavery should be reintroduced as a legitimate trade. People like him believe that you should be able to marry prepubescent children and have sex with them like their prophet. People like him believe. That is what they believe. That is what we are up against. And you will never be able to fight them whilst you are in bed with liberals, whilst you are in bed with plurality or liberal agenda, because the liberals are weak and they give trash like that too much space to preach their poison, too much space to push their Sharia law. A good and just person will stand against Sharia law just as they stood against Nazism and fascism, because Sharia law is in the same cesspit of inhumanity and injustice that fascism and communism sit in. It is putrid filth. It is the enemy of all that is good and decent. And you should have no shame in opposing such an ideology. But how, as Christians, can we oppose it? We must oppose it as Christians, authentically as Christians. We must separate ourselves from the liberal agenda and from the aspirations of liberal society, and we, as Christians, should envision our own political destiny, our own political aspirations, and our own vision of a Christian state that we call Christendom, and seek to reconnect society, politics, and economics with our Christian faith. Any questions, ladies and gentlemen? Any questions?